this week it might be fun to talk about Dr. Fraiser. And I know you're at the point of the series where you've recently seen a Heroes episode, and I was thinking this would be maybe a good time after this episode to talk about this character because she is just such a powerful and amazing character. And the story was so tragic, but also so beautiful, and the two-parter of the conclusion of her appearance on the show. And so I thought I would like to ask kind of maybe we could just start with sharing our initial thoughts on Dr. Fraiser as a character and our initial impressions. So maybe you can start by sharing that.
Yeah. With hold on. Oh, okay. I was just making sure I hadn't kept myself on mute and that I was just talking muted. um yeah, with Dr. Frasier, I feel like for my viewing of it, initially, it's like she's a character that's always there, that at first I didn't fully appreciate the importance of her character, if that makes sense. So it's like I feel like initially, she's just kind of there. She's in a lot of the episodes. She plays an important role, but I feel like I didn't really realize, how much I liked that character until further down the road, if that makes sense. So it's like also, I guess what's kind of funny is watching it second time through is that, she's, like, in everything, now, she's in everything, like, that actress, and so it's like, I can't help but, think of, she's been in, a million different, Hallmark movies. I used to watch
Oh,
Hallmark
really?
movies
Okay.
all the time, she's, constantly in those. Um, she's been in, a lot of other things, I can't think of what, but I have regularly seen her in Hallmark movies. And so it's just funny because it's like I feel like I noticed her character more the second time through because I had seen the actress after watching it the first time through, like the full run of the show. And then later and down in the years, then I see her in other things and I'm like, oh, that's the lady that was in Stargate, And then, but anyways, I'm digressing. But yeah, so your question was, what do I think of Dr. Frasier, right? Like initially. And
Hmm.
it's just basically that I guess, if I'm being totally honest, initially, I didn't really think much, nothing against the character itself, but I just never really noticed her that much because I was too distracted with everything that was going on. But then as the show progresses and you start to see, her relationship with the characters, and especially I really like how she's, good friends with Sam's character, or that is the character, Sam Carter. Um, I started to really like her and feel myself, more attached to her as I started to see her relationships with the other characters grow, if that makes sense.
True. And but it's really interesting you brought that up that you says this. I didn't really notice that she was there. Like, but probably then you notice when she's gone, but it's true because it's like with the doctors, that's kind of like in a way the case. It's like
Yeah.
her job at the SGC was making sure everybody is healthy and well so that they can go off and do these missions, and they're the ones working in the field, and you know, she's kind of this background worker. But I love that in the show they did give her some episodes where, I mean, especially later on, I think because they saw her character was kind of a favorite, and um, people really liked the character, that she got some shows where really she had to be the one figuring it out. And I mean, already early on, I guess one of the episodes where both her and Sam really get to shine is in like Hathor,
Mm.
because they have to, they're basically the only ones that are not overcome by the Hathor's like weird breath or whatever.
Yeah.
And I
That
mean, it's
sounds
also kind
funny.
of, I mean, it's also kind of really funny in a way because both, like both characters, I mean, part of the charm of them is that they're strong female characters, that they don't have to like they're not like, you know, half naked all the time, and that there's so many things about them that are fantastic other than that. And then in that episode they have to like basically, as they say, use their charms to, you know, convince everyone to go along with them. But it's just done in such a like it's done really well. Like I thought it was done
Yeah.
really well in such a nice way, and it kind of reminds you like, yeah, I mean, they are these like kick butt characters, but they're also like really pretty and everything. Like it's just they are doing so well at their work that it doesn't have to
Yeah.
be what they're about. And I think that's also really great. And one of the early things that I think was also introduced with Sam that I think also uh adds to how I felt about the Dr. Frasier character is Cassandra, because Dr.
Yes,
Frasier
yeah.
ends up adopting Cassandra, which is the girl that Sam found who was originally, trying to be used by Nirti and to, I guess, destroy the SGC, and yeah, Dr. Frasier ended up adopting her, and I think that also kind of made even stronger bond between Sam and Janet, which I really loved because I love that they're like these two really like scientists, extremely smart people that also have this like friendship, and the friendship is, also centered around like something that is so like emotional.
Yeah.
And that's again one of the things I love, that the writers weren't afraid to allow these like super strong characters to like, where normally they would maybe try and pull back from that, because strong women can't have this like, especially at that time. I mean, it was the 90s, we have to remember, and
Yeah.
they did that, and
Yeah.
so I love that aspect of it. So
Yeah.
but I think there was also this kind of, and I don't know if this is something you ever picked up on it, because to be honest, like I didn't really pick up on it until after I had read about it. I think, and Michael Shanks mentioned this, that apparently Dr. Frasier and Daniel had some kind of like, maybe even deeper than friendship bond, whether it was like romantic love or that they were just really close. And I didn't pick up on that personally until I like when he said it, and then you can start seeing it more. Like if you watch scenes with them, you can see their interactions more, but yeah.
Yeah, I honestly never picked up on it. I remember you telling me about it, and I was really surprised. And so then I had that in the back of my mind, and I still never saw it. Like, if I'm being totally honest, I still just never saw it. I think part of it is that her character is so professional. Like, even though obviously the other characters are too, there's elements of they let their they're not so, like, rigid, like, they let their, not that she's rigid, but, like, I guess if you think of it in real life, you know, someone in that position is always probably gonna be very professional. They're probably, at least you would hope, they're probably not gonna let their personal feelings shine through if they even like someone at their workplace. And so that's how I feel maybe she kind of played it. So to me, like I never would have thought that there was anything there. Like I just didn't notice it at all, even after you told me. Because I feel like and that could just be my ability to recognize those kinds of things, I don't know. Like, because I just feel like, for example, it's like they make it obvious when it's, Sam and Jack, right? They make it obvious when
Yes.
they have those moments, they play their little theme, and, I think they have a specific theme for them, or at least a tune that they do, like, in a way that you always most of the time when they have their little lovey-dovey, heart-wrenching moments. Um, but, like, with Doctor Frasier and Daniel, I don't kno unless, like, maybe you know specific moments where you noticed it, I don't know if you can remember, but, like, I just always seemed like everything felt very professional, like, I never noticed any sort of vibe or anything, but I don't know, that could just be me.
I mean, it also could be that once I read it, I applied it more. You know what I mean? So maybe like once I read that, then when I watch it, I was like, ah, yeah, you can see it. Because I mean, it is very subtle, like some of the things I've noticed, but I think you can, like, you could discern that, like if you knew. But I don't know, maybe I'd be interested. Maybe we should open up to our community and let us know. Did you ever notice anything?
Yeah,
Um, because it's interesting that we've both had these totally different reactions of it, especially considering that we both heard it. And I mean, I would say, yeah, in the before I knew, I didn't really pay attention or notice, but after I knew, then I noticed, and I was like, oh yeah, you
interesting,
can see
yeah,
something.
yeah. I
So
tried to see something because you had told me about reading that, and so I was in the process of watching stuff and thinking of that sometimes when they had their interactions, but I couldn't see it. Um, but, like, I guess, do you think those characters would make sense together? And could you imagine them actually like dating had they been given the chance to do so? Like, I don't know if that would have been against the rules because of working together, but they're in different departments, really. So I don't know if that would matter.
Well, I
But
think
yeah.
Daniel's not military, so I don't know.
Oh, right. Yeah.
I don't know how that works. So maybe it's totally okay. But I mean, I could see it because I think in a sense they're both kind of these empathetic characters that are like in a way concerned for like taking care of things and caring for and recovering people in their own different ways. So I think they have a lot in common in that way.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I think overall, like if I think about it and I think, okay, who would Daniel work with other than some people he's clearly paired with and some of them you haven't seen? I could probably see that working in a way the most.
Mm.
I mean, almost more than Sharae if Sharae wasn't already his partner. I
Hmm.
could see that like more from a but more from like a the standpoint of you work together and you become familiar with each other and you have things in common and so you have this kind of comfortable love relationship that grows rather than something, in some episodes there's people they meet and it's just like this instant they're drawn to each other
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's right. You're right. Like at first I couldn't see it, but the way you described it, I think makes a lot of sense that you have changed my opinion on that. Like I could see that. I do have to clear something up though that I said like when our very I think it was our very first episode, like our very first podcast episode, I think, or like
Oh
1 or 2.
no.
Like I want well, no, I was just thinking about how ridiculous this comment was from me because I had just started rewatching and I said to you, I said, "Oh, I'm surprised that Sam and Daniel, like, didn't like each other," and you were like, "Oh, really? Like, they're like brother and sister vibes," and I was just like, "Really?" But, like, I could see, like, they both seem this and I'm going on and on about why I think they would be no, I was delusional. Like, they definitely give, like, brother-sister vibes, and the thought of that is just really gross to my mind now, but it's because I haven't I haven't watched the characters progress, so it's like my first thought of, like, the first few episodes was like, "Wouldn't she like Daniel? Like, that makes sense to me." But no, that seems weird now. That seems really weird.
But, I mean, I could totally see, especially in the beginning, because they're both the scientists and the intellectual
Yeah,
ones. And then you have O'Neill where it's kind of like, when Carter comes in and it they kind of, Dan explains, yeah, he has this thing with scientists. It almost seems like they would kind of join together in their being a scientistness.
yeah,
But yeah, as it goes on, it's like very clear. It's more of like a you know,
yeah,
brother sister kind
yeah,
of bestie thing that it would
yeah,
never go there.
and I was just, like, thinking of that with one of the when I was watching it more recently, and I'm just like, "That's so funny I even thought that." Like, you must have thought I was nuts. Because it's funny how your, like, ideas change with things once you get used to, like, how the character progresses as a person and, like, things that happen in the episodes, like, you start to realize, like, first impressions of them are not always accurate, just like in real life, your first impressions of people usually aren't right.
Absolutely. And I think there's so much development that happens after season one. Like the characters are
Yeah,
kind of just so who knows, maybe they originally thought, oh, let's put Sam and Daniel together. That would make sense too. They might, I don't know. I have no idea I mean, especially because in the beginning they really kind of almost there were some episodes with O'Neill where I thought they were trying to make him like a Captain Kirk type character, that he was always finding a woman on every planet, but
oh, yeah,
it just didn't fit the vibe of that character at all. Like
yeah,
that kind of thing. Like O'Neill is just not that.
yeah,
Um, so I just it's interesting, but yeah, those kind of things. But I mean, in the sense of this question of could Daniel and uh uh, Dr. Fraiser have dated because of their ranks or whatever. What's interesting that I find is in terms of Dr. Fraiser's rank, like obviously she doesn't really outrank everybody, but in a way she kind of does.
Mhm.
And I thought like like one of the best, Dr. Fraiser moments of where you kind of are really it's put in front of you like how powerful is this character in the show and what is the importance is in Window of Opportunity actually. Um because they always have to go back and be examined by Dr. Fraiser.
Ah, yeah.
And remember, and like it's like there's no choice, there's nothing they can do. They have to have their temperature taken. They have to, and then it's like then you see at this moment, yes, the doctor has all precedence over these characters, even if they're,
Yeah. Even with General Hammonds too, right? Like, I think
Mhm.
there's been a few times, like, he's tried to I can't really remember specifics, but I remember watching an episode where she was telling him like no, they needed to like wait to go on a mission or something. And she was saying like her expert opinion of like, doctor wise, like what they needed to do in order to be okay to then go on their mission. I don't remember which one that was. So it's like she isn't afraid to like just like stand up for what she felt was right and which makes sense, but, like, I do like that about her character. She's never someone that seems to ever, like, back down from anything,
Mhm.
whether it was, trying to come up with a solution to help someone, and maybe some people were thinking, like, there wasn't anything left to do, and she's, like, trying to think of things to do, and things like that that, like, I think is really cool about her character, and I think, it's interesting for me as a viewer because, like you says, I know that many people love her character. Um, but it's weird how, like, fast forwarding through all these episodes to then her final episode, then you just realize like how much then you're gonna miss her with that final episode that she's in. That it's just like you then it's like it makes me think of like the impact. So it's like you go all the way to that episode where she dies basically, and then you just realize the impact that that character has had on your whole like viewing process. But it's like I didn't realize, if that makes sense. It's kind of like I'm
Yep.
like, oh, that's sad.
Oh, for sure. For sure, for sure. So yeah, I mean on the topic of heroes and maybe like just before we will get into our reactions to Heroes and what we thought of it. And um, of course, this is a different era of TV, like very different. And it was before. I mean, now I think we're used to consuming things in a sort of binge way of watching like whole season on Netflix. And I think that sort of changed that shows were rather than being like individual one-offs, that they now shows are more continuous. But back at this time, they had two-part shows, and for anyone watching that didn't really watch TV in that time, you would watch one and then you'd have to wait a week to see the conclusion, and I think Stargate was definitely one of the shows that did a lot of this, where they would have, um, this episode that ended in a way that it didn't really end, and you'd have to wait for the next episode. Sometimes you'd have to wait over, like, a season pause, so it could be even more than a week,
Yeah.
and, which is very different than actually other TV at the time, because a lot of them, it was just like they had an episode and the episode was completely unrelated to necessarily other episodes because of how people
Mhm.
were consuming things. So I think this is actually really kind of important. And I think it was one of the things that Stargate used so that they could actually tell more like deeper stories that spanned a greater length of time. And it's interesting because I will say for the most part, and you maybe, I don't know, maybe you have a different uh, feeling on this, but up until Heroes, I feel like most the two-parters generally have something to do with their fight against the enemy is usually like something advancing the world plot or dealing with replicators or something that is taking more of a, the fate of humanity hangs in the balance up until this point. And I don't know if you had the same reaction to that or how you
Yeah.
felt about.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree that the two-parters seem just like that, like, up until the Heroes two-parter. Um, If I'm being like, well, I hate how I always say, if I'm being totally honest, but like this is such an annoying saying because I am honest. I'm honest all the time, damn it.
No, you're lying half the
I
time.
guess it's
Only
just
when you're
like,
saying that are you being
yeah,
honest.
yeah. Um, but sometimes with the two-parters prior to this two-parter that we're about to talk about, I wasn't always into the two-parters. Like, I just felt like sometimes it felt like I enjoyed them. It's just I think it comes from being used to a modern day way of viewing things is why I'm feeling that way, because I get impatient. And I think when things are dragged out to a two-parter, I feel just that. I feel like they're dragged out. And I feel like I mean, I can obviously watch it right away. Like I have the luxury of being able to just like click on the other episode and I don't have to wait. Um but, like, going back to the time of TV when you did have to wait, I think it was torturous to have to wait, but it wasn't as torturous as it would be now if we had to wait. Because now
Yeah.
everyone's used to being able to just click on the next episode, watch a bunch of episodes. And if anything, people then can't wait. Like, for example, like I've mentioned before, is I love Bridgerton. And they have, like they did this thing with this season where they have, like, they do half seasons. So they do, like, a bunch of shows, and then you have, like, a few weeks gap before you get to watch the next last bit of the season. And so I'm just like, "Oh my god, it feels so long, like, why?" And so, like, I feel like that's part of my take on the two-parters as a modern day viewer. Had I been watching it when it actually was out, I probably would like that would probably build anticipation, I would imagine. Like, I'm trying to remember how I felt back in that time because I never watched the show. I don't know how old I was when the show first came out, but I never watched the show when it was like first out, right? I watched it after it had already been done, right? Um
Mhm.
and so there was always an opportunity to binge watch. But yeah, anyways, that was my thought on the two-parters is exactly right. Like it always felt more of like the two-parters were what you said, where it was like a battle kind of thing. And it was kind of like there's more to the story to have to like show that. So yeah, I mean, do you like two-parters? Like before the Heroes two-parter, episodes. Did you like the other two-part episodes? Like, did you enjoy those just as much or more or less? Like, what is your take on it?
Mhm. I mean, probably I would say Heroes is kind of up there as one of the top. In my opinion, I mean, we can get into this about why I think it's one of the like most unique and one of the better two-parters. This is also a bit unfair because I'm further along, and so there are more. I feel like there are more impactful, like other two-parters that are very enjoyable in season 8, 9, and 10.
Oh, okay.
And I'm already like in the beginning of season 10, so I've seen some, and so it's a bit unfair to to because I think I have different viewpoint than you at the moment. But I would
Mhm.
say if I'm going, okay, I've just even including that, I would say Heroes is really up there as one of the most impactful, even if it's not a two-parter, it's one of the most impactful, well done, unique episodes already. Um, but I think it's interesting because I also have the same experience of two-part with these two-parters as you, is that even when I watched them on the discs and had to rent the discs from the library, usually the disc came that the two-parter was on the same disc. So
Mhm.
it wasn't even something where like I would have to wait to get the other disc from like the library or something. And the only real experience I have of having to wait for something with Stargate, because I did watch it before it was completely done. I watched it, I believe, there was a point at where I was watching it where season 9 hadn't fully completed yet.
Oh, really? Okay.
And so I do remember watching the season 9 finale, and it does end on a cliffhanger. But it's always very interesting to me because I find you have this experience, and it's interesting that you said, yeah, nowadays I don't think people could manage because we are so used to having it. But I always have this experience that like right after you really want to know. and you have this really like need to, oh my gosh, what's happening? How am I going to survive the next 3 months not knowing? But like usually within 2 or 3 days, you kind of go, oh, okay, like your life goes on and you kind of don't remember and you manage and you'll remember again when it comes. Maybe you write down the date. And I don't know, I'd be interested to hear what experience other people had because that's
Yeah.
usually the experience I have is that, in that immediate period, it's very like, oh no, I need to know. But then after somehow you don't
Yeah.
you don't remember as much. And I don't know, like because I also didn't have the experience of, needing to wait a week. Maybe in that situation, it's a shorter period of time than like 3 months. So maybe at that point, you'd really like, oh, I really need to see the conclusion of this, especially because of the way it ends. And I mean, for sure, we have done some two-parters where we watched one and it was on the weekend, and then we couldn't watch the next for a few days. But I mean, I also kind of somewhat knew the conclusion of it, or at least had some inkling. So this is also a bit unfair to say. But I will say what's something that I think that is very special about Heroes, and maybe we can start talking about that a little bit. Our feelings of this is there was the impact of it and the things that really kind of tugged at you were much more emotional than necessarily like in a way. I mean, this is a bad word, but like suspenseful or like earth tragedy. And it was like so delicate in a way and so well done, but it was so emotional and you were so involved in it from that perspective. And I think that's part of what I think really pulled you in. So maybe right now, I mean, you can just tell me because you very recently saw Heroes. What were your thoughts? Just start your basic thoughts on
Yeah.
the
Basic thoughts, yeah. No, I mean, I definitely think if I remember correctly, did I watch both one after the other? I can't remember. It may have been late at night that I watched the first part one and then was too tired, but really wanted to watch part two, but was too tired. But yes, definitely very emotional. Definitely. So I had a strange thing that happened actually because like when I first went to watch it, because I've recently had to change the service provider, whatever you call it, to watch it. Because initially I was watching it on Amazon Prime and then through MGM subscription, and then they switched it where you couldn't have it on there anymore. And so then I'm now on Now TV. And so I was still getting used to, each thing has its own setup. And so I clicked like uh continue for like the next episode and thought that it was at like the end of like an episode I watched. So then I clicked next episode. And then it's showing like the preview of the first episode, or it was like starting with something. And I'm like, wait, what? What's going on? Like, I recognize that character, but I don't remember watching that. And I was so confused because, like, they're showing like clips from like the guy that wants to do the interviews and all of that. And like, I recognized him because I must have had a memory of these episodes from prior. And so I started watching part two, and I'm just like, I don't remember any of this. But like, is this really bad? Like, what's going on? There's no way. So then I went back after a few like seconds of watching part 2 and went to part 1. So that was my first
Oh
experience
no.
of like confusing the hell out of myself
Oh
by being
no.
like, what is going on? But then once I put on part 1, then I'm like, oh, okay, you get introduced to these characters and everything. So that makes sense. I haven't seen that. So yeah, I mean, I think you're exactly right where like um I maybe can't list specific reasons of feeling this way, but I think you definitely described it properly in terms of how I felt it with where it was like a tug of emotion throughout, like with various characters. As opposed to there being um like I guess yeah, I think you described it well where you're mentioning suspense and things like that because it wasn't that feeling. It was a feeling of like you kind of find yourself emotionally like drawn with different characters, kind of guessing what might happen with certain characters because of how they play up certain storylines and um yeah, it was just very different but
Hmm.
none of it was ever boring, and I felt like each part, like, seemed like equally pulls you in, whereas I didn't feel that with the other two-parters that I've seen. Like, the other two-parters, it's like maybe they're in the midst of, like, a battle or something, and then it ends, and you're like, "Oh my gosh, what's gonna happen?" But it's not that same feeling that you get as a viewer in terms of emotion, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, what's really interesting is like, I mean, on the one hand, there's all the layers, but it's fascinating because it is 100% true that the team itself and sort of the focal point of the story is not at all in the action, because the only action that's happening is this other team that's off-world, but they're kind of one of the different SG teams. They're not main characters, and so it's not the main storyline. It's more like a B storyline in a way. Like they have
Mhm.
this sort of B subplot with the, that they go on a different planet and they're just exploring ruins and then they end up getting attacked. And it's interesting because that creates the whole impact of the story, but it's not even the main storyline. And I thought it was very interesting because you do have, up until now, they're starting to build this kind of tension of the civilian organizations and SG-1, and should it be military? Should it be known to the public? And so I thought it was really cool that they took this kind of already plot line that they have going on, and then they brought in this concept of creating a documentary, which, I think a lot of shows at this time started to try and do things that were more experimental, and is the only SG-1 episode that's done like this, where they have
Mhm.
different point of views, and it's like sometimes you're seeing it from behind the camera of the person creating the documentary, and it's almost like, one of those situations where they're telling the story of what's going on in Stargate, but doing it through a different means, which I think is really cool.
Yeah.
And but also at the same time, like they're trying to, like, I love that there's this kind of gray area because at the beginning they're kind of against doing the documentary and they're trying to tell the director why, and why it's wrong to film these things or why they don't want to do this. But by the end it becomes kind of gray because, in he asked the director asked, Daniel to take some footage of when he's actually off world, and he doesn't want to do it, and he doesn't want to give it to him at all, and in the end he does. And because of actually what happened in the tape, which is kind of the focal point of the episode, it also maybe somewhat shifts or feels mind of the director as well. And I think it's another one of those cases where they
Wait, I'm
do a really
sorry,
good
you had
job
cut
of.
out for a second. What did you say about the director?
Oh, that this what happens in the tape also impacts the
Yeah.
director. Like he has a response to it because of the way that they develop the director's relationships with characters in the episode up to that point,
Yeah.
and especially I think. And so it's this another weird Stargate situation where they have this sort of topic of what is the right thing to do ethically, and there's so many layers to it and so many complexities that you almost can't really decide, and it just makes you
Yeah.
think about it. um but then of course, I would like to ask you, because there were kind of three different storylines of people that could have been impacted in the episode. um and I mean, I know one is kind of like a non-main character, and then the other two were main characters, and they kind of made you think that one of them was either almost mortally wounded or then eventually was mortally wounded.
Yeah.
And what was your thinking when this was going on?
So, let's see. So I don't remember the names of like the non-main character, but he was just a member of another SG team, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And he was the one that has a baby on the way.
Hmm.
And then the other character would be Jack O'Neill that they were making you
Yes.
think something happened to Jack O'Neill. And who was the third one?
Dr. Fraiser.
Ah, well, yeah. But I don't feel like they really
No,
indicate.
You're right, they didn't. They didn't
Yeah,
indicate it at all. I think they it was like trying to make you figure out between that I think sergeant or airman, maybe I don't know the rank, but they were trying
yeah,
to make you decide between that and O'Neill. And I mean, I think this is also another way which I thought was kind of clever with the documentary is that in the documentary a little bit with the interview kind of just play with, the fact that Sam likes O'Neill, and
mhm.
then later on, they almost made it seem like he was the one that passed away because of Sam's reaction. So
Yeah, that is very genius. Yeah. Yeah, because, like we've said before, this is my second run through of SG-1, and,
mhm,
I had vaguely remembered characters, like faces. Like I'm terrible with remembering full things that happen. Like I'll watch something and then forget it. I'll forget characters' names, but then like there's certain things that stand out. So for some reason, when I first started watching this, the thing that stood out to me was the interviewer, and I remembered him. And initially, I thought he was kind of an
mhm.
ass. And so I think with the way to get back around to what you were asking, the way they were. Sorry, actually, what was your question? You were asking about the 3 people. What was your
Yeah, and I
question?
guess it's the 2 people, really, because
Yeah,
I guess you're right, Dr. Fraser wasn't really implicated as possibly being one of the injured people at all.
yeah.
Like, did you have a feeling when they said, someone was mortally wounded, did you have a feeling one way or the other of who it was and
Okay, well,
why?
yeah. So the feeling I had was partially unfair in the sense that I knew that it wouldn't be O'Neill.
Mhm. Yep.
Because I knew um from watching it prior that it wasn't O'Neill. So I'm just like, okay, well, who is it? And so what I thought it was either one of the guys from that team they kept showing in the beginning, because there was multiple of them together, and there was two guys that I kept thinking it was going to be one of them. I don't remember their names, but one was the guy that was talking about joking about how it was a pain in the ass to have 3 kids or something like that.
Oh, yeah,
Him
okay.
or the guy that was talking about having a baby coming soon. And so I kept thinking it was one of them. But when they had Sam's reaction, and then you see Daniel's reaction, and you see that they're feeling so strongly, I'm just like, either they're trying to make you think, I mean, obviously they were trying to make us think it was O'Neill, but I knew it wasn't O'Neill. So I'm like, but what would make sense for them to have such a strong reaction? Like, it's got to be a character that you've been impacted by more than just this one episode. So I'm just like, who could it be? And like, that was my thought throughout, but it didn't click. Like, what I thought is that they were trying to make them seem like, um, for lack of a better way of putting it, obviously any death is going to be impactful and is going to affect the people that work with them. But because of it being characters we'd never seen before, I thought the reaction was very strong. And I thought,
Mhm,
okay, either the writers are really trying to make you think that it's O'Neill and it's really just going to be one of those guys. So ultimately, as a viewer, it doesn't really affect the outcome too much because they're just making you think it's like this big deal of O'Neill leaving and it's not. And then you find that out at the end. Um, that was my initial thought through
mhm.
most of it. Then as you get into the second one, I think I'm still thinking that, like, for part 2, but, um, when I realized that Daniel was acting weird, and then when they show the scene where there's blood on his camera, and he's not wanting to show the director, and the director's like, "Oh, you took, footage, like, can I see it?" And, like, Daniel was really distraught by that, and I'm just like, "Oh, no," because what had happened to going away from this episode for a second, I had completely forgotten that Dr. Fraiser dies at all. Like, I did not know, like, ahead
Oh,
of
no,
time,
yeah.
but Amanda Tapping ruined it for me because being the Stargate obsessed person that I am, I was watching maybe like a month or so ago, like a bunch of different Comic-Con footage of when she was talking, and someone had asked her something about episodes and their impact and or things that impacted them most, and she just very subtly mentioned like, "Oh, well, when Dr. Fraiser dies, that really affected me." And I'm like, "Wait, what?"
Oh no. Yeah.
Dr. Fraiser dies. Damn you, Amanda Tapping.
Oh no.
Yeah, ruined it for me. I'd forgotten that. And so, like, I thought, well, shit, now I know that. Like, I totally forgot that that ever even happened, but I guess it makes sense because then eventually someone different comes on. And so, like, so that was in the back of my mind. And so while I wasn't fixated on that happening, and I did not think that that was happening in this two-parter for like most of the time, it wasn't until the very end that when I started getting suspicious when they had her go off world to help. And I'm like, oh no, no. And then a memory started coming
Oh
back to me of
no. Yeah.
watching it previously. And I remembered the guy, the interviewer, or he's the director too, right, in the episode.
Mhm.
um
Mhm.
but I remember him being upset about what he'd seen, and but I didn't know if my memory was fully right, and so I really didn't fully know that I was right in that thought until like I saw it on the episode. I was so sad.
Yeah.
So sad. I truly started bawling my eyes out. Like, granted, it was very late. I was very tired. I'm watching
No.
it thinking, "Oh my god, who is it? Who is it? Who is it?" Um, but I mean, I do cry easily at things, but like this one got me. I was just like, "Oh, like I'm so sad. Like this is really sad." And then just the way they show it, like they have it on footage and they just see it happen and like it's like instantaneous, like she's just gone. Which is how it would happen in real life, right? Like, a lot of times they drag things out because then they're gonna help the person, so the person's just kind of almost in an unnatural way, the person in an unnatural way will be kind of clinging on for life, and then they end up being okay, and so I think I'm so used to seeing that on this show that people make it out of like the roughest situations where you think they're going to die, that to just have it be like she's talking to the guy, she's telling him, "Don't worry, we're going to help you." She gets hit and then she's just gone. And I'm just like, "Oh my god."
Yep.
What was
Yeah.
your
No, that
thing
is
with
so.
that
It is
part?
so. Yeah. I mean, so I'll get to that because I think that that video was just so well done, and yeah, it's impossible to not like turn into a puddle watching that. But
Yeah.
I totally thought it was the airman who was having the baby because like initially because I thought well they they set it up, they wanted to pull at you a little bit by introducing you to the character and giving a reason why like you really don't want them to be the one, but then they're going to take like because otherwise it's well they have a new character, they introduced a new character, but then they had the scene where, Carter's really upset or something, and I think Hammond, if I remember right, it's Hammond that comes and he's like, "Yeah, you want to tell yourself that every person, is equal on the base, but there's some that just hit harder than others." Like he's paraphrasing, but he said something like that, right? Something of
Mhm.
that nature. And then when that
Mhm.
happened, I was like, "Is it O'Neill?" But I mean, on the other hand, I knew that it couldn't possibly be, so I was very but then again, Daniel ascended, so I think at the time I was watching it, I started having no clue.
Mhm.
But my first thought was, oh, it has to be the one who is having the baby. Like that was the one it was like they were really setting it up that was the case. And they were kind of like not known, so they could take them out of the cast. Like it wasn't a character that was regular, but because they were having a baby and they set that up, it would make you upset enough.
Yeah.
But then when they show I mean, the video itself, it's really painful because on the one hand, you watch him getting hurt, and then he is saying, I would like to, make a video, and this is why Daniel turns on the
Exactly,
camera
yeah.
is to make the video for his wife and his, I guess, newborn son, who ends up being a daughter, but, and it's always really painful to watch because all of a sudden, Frasier gets hit and then like it stops recording and then you hear like I think it's Daniel, he says, "We need a medic" or something. And you're right,
Yeah,
it's over so fast. Like there's
yeah,
no like pomp about it. And then they just cut. And that's I think when I think Hammond says that it was Dr. Frasier. And it's
mhm.
just like it just hits you like whoof, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah. I think the way, like, I just really love all of the writers for this show so much because I just feel
yes.
like it amazes me what they're able to do with all their writing skills. Like I've never watched a show that has like been written so well before. Like I just feel
Mhm.
like the way they did this particular two-parter just like shines their talent because I feel like I'm someone that I can, and I think many people are like this, where when you're watching a show, you can easily kind of pick up on things and you're like, oh, okay, that's actually
Mhm.
going to happen. And this is actually going to happen. And it's really not that person, it's that person. And you can put it all together quite easily with certain shows. And with this, it didn't do that. Like you truly like the only reason I knew it wasn't O'Neill was because I knew it wasn't O'Neill from watching before. That's the only
Yep.
reason. Otherwise, I probably would have thought for a while it was O'Neill and thought, "Oh my gosh, what?" Like, you
Yep.
know, um, and so I can't remember. It's a shame I can't remember what I thought the first time through. But again, first time through, I was watching it on DVDs at the time that you let me borrow, and it
Yep.
shows, I can't remember if it shows images of him on the other one because I know eventually he leaves, but I just knew that it wasn't him. Maybe I thought it was him last time. I don't really know. I don't know for sure. But yeah, but anyways, my point being is the way the writers were able to geniusly put in, and I guess also the editors, the way they edited the whole
Yes,
episode,
100%.
like
Yeah.
the whole team of how they put it all together like was perfect because I feel like they had you think what they wanted you to think, basically.
Mhm.
They did really well with having probably majority of people think what they wanted them to think until the last second. And,
Yep.
and I'm curious what you thought of the actor or the character that plays the director and interviewer, because with myself, I found I didn't like him at first. I just thought he was an ass. I felt like he didn't care about anyone. He just wanted the story. Um, I found the interviews to be very humorous. I loved that how they had the characters be very defiant. They had
Mhm.
Carter. Carter was all into it, but she was very scared of the camera and very awkward. That was funny.
It was
Jack
cute,
wouldn't
yeah.
Jack wouldn't talk to anyone or say like really weird random jokes. Teal'c was just like staring at him. Um, Daniel, I don't remember what I think Daniel kind of talked, but then just got pissed off. General Hammond got pissed off. And like so this whole time they kind of set you up to not like this interviewer, Um and just feel like that's why he tossed the camera Daniel's way is he didn't care what he got on there. He wanted something that um you know is sorry, I got distracted because Taylor just texted me. um I'll turn off my notifications for that. um but yeah, what was I saying? I totally lost my train of thought.
The
um
the director, how they kind of, uh, portrayed him to be, and then maybe how you felt about him at the end.
Yeah, yeah. So basically, in the beginning, I didn't like him. I just felt like he was going for the story. He didn't care if people died or got injured or whatever. He wanted it all on camera. He wanted people to give the dirt. He was trying to insinuate with Carter, like, oh, you have something going on with Jack, which could have gotten her in a lot of trouble and him in a lot of trouble and potentially caused them to be fired or whatever. And trying to plant things almost to create a story in a way. I know he wanted the story to share, but I felt like, especially with Samantha Carter, he wanted to, because he wasn't getting anything from any of them, he almost tried to prey on the fact that she was being willing enough to
Yep.
be honest, that he was trying to manipulate her. So I didn't like him. But then fast forward to how he was with Frasier, and he genuinely liked Frasier from the start. Dr. Frasier, like I felt like, he kind of flirted with her a little bit, and like he just seemed genuinely interested in her. You kind of see a different side of things. And then when it fast forwards to the end where he realizes who it was, what I find kind of annoying is that if it wasn't her, I think he wouldn't have cared that it was shown.
Yep.
But because it was her and he felt an emotional attachment to her, it kind of almost made him suddenly realize like, "Whoa, no, we can't show this." Um, to which then I think Daniel then says, "No, show it because then it will show like what a hero she was and that kind of thing." So what are your thoughts? Sorry, that was my long-winded. I can never just like say short sentences.
Mhm.
But that was my long-winded thought on that character and kind of the effects of that character throughout. Like, what are your thoughts?
I would say mine are probably very similar because I mean, I agree with you. They brought him in not really as an antagonist, but in that sort of way of that, it was this bothersome thing. There was at this moment a lot of tension between, I think, like the SGC and civilians and whether to make the program known to the public, etc. And I'm sure that there's probably also then this tension with, journalists and the people that, I mean, in a way, it's probably the lens we're looking at it through. Like if we were watching the show through the lens of people that where the plan was to, show secret organizations in the US government, we would probably think he was a good guy. But I think
Mhm.
because of where he was placed and the context of which he was placed, he was really brought in more as an antagonist. And I love the interviews too because it's one of those things where this is such a like tear-jerking emotional episode, but they do have those moments of humor. And it's
Yeah.
like they can never, get away from that. There's like always this some moments of like kind of playfulness. And I thought that was extremely well done. And it's just such a like, it kind of brings up such complicated issues because
Mhm.
when he's talking like, he talks to Daniel and he's talking about the picture that was taken at, like, the worst moment and, the perspective that you see it as of, whether you're seeing something tragic or something heroic. And, I mean, that also kind of brings to light a little bit, like, our experiences of looking at those things, our experience of interacting with those things. And I mean, how often are we shown something where it's really shown as like an act of heroism, but it's really a tragedy or vice versa?
Yeah.
And I mean, that's something. So I think in that sense, I really love that it kind of made you think a little bit. And of course, I think by the end, you never really get the impression he's not like still the typical, you know, Hollywood, I'm gonna do my thing the way I want, get done what I want the way I want. Like that's still
Mhm.
part of his character, but you can tell he's learned something, and I
Mhm.
really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Even if he's not at his core change. And I think, I mean, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, because I saw this a longer time ago, but doesn't Hammond say that for people that the families, they might show the video to the families of people who pass away? Or is that something else I'm thinking of?
I think so. I vaguely remember him saying something. I think, yeah, I think so. I think, yeah, that's a very like a quick thing that's said near the end, I believe.
Hmm.
After maybe, I don't know if it was after Sam Carter, says her speech and stuff. I don't know if it was around then that then like you hear that. But yeah, because I think it ends up being right that like they end up watching the documentary and
Hmm.
liking it and feeling like and then I can't remember who it was that said, "Oh, it's a shame that will never be seen."
Yes, yeah.
And then maybe that's when General Hammond was like mentioning about showing it to the family members. Yeah, I'd forgotten about that, but you're right. Yeah. Yeah.
Which also brings us back to probably one of the more impactful moments of this, and I think it's just sheer brilliance, is the eulogy that Carter gives.
Mhm.
Because what leads to it is this moment between her and Tilk, which I love. I love that it's Tilk that she has the moment with. And I love, like that she says to him, I really can't find the words. Like, I have no idea what to say. And it's true. Like, what would you say? Like, it's
Mm.
almost like, can you think of what you would say about this? I mean, there's no words that could really do that justice. And then Tilk kind of giving his idea and what his idea was. I thought it was just like an absolutely, brilliant, brilliant eulogy.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm terrible with fully remembering specifics with that, so feel free to remind me.
Oh, what happened was that Tilk came to her and he gave the paper, like basically the
Mhm.
words that he thought of. And what it was is that when she got up and gave the eulogy, she said, I couldn't really find the words to describe, what she meant to us. But she said, here people would not be here if not for
Oh,
Janet
that's
Fraiser.
right. Yeah.
And then she
Yeah.
starts, and it's literally everybody on the base.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's so powerful. Yeah, thanks for reminding me with that because I remember it being very like powerful at the time. But like I said, I don't know why my brain is like this, but like I would probably have to watch that episode like again to then fully like remember those things specifically. But I do remember it feeling very powerful at the time. And at that point I'm already bawling my eyes out. So I probably didn't fully hear it. I'm just like, oh yeah, that is incredibly powerful like, more so than trying to say all these nice facts about a person, to
Yep.
say how that person affected everyone else's life was like, oh, like,
Yeah, exactly, right? That was just it was
yeah,
like this, like, as if you're not already, like, teary up enough and, like, it's this tragic thing, then
yeah,
suddenly and then you're like, "Oh, there we go, it hits you again." But
yeah. I
yeah.
wonder if that was the episode. Maybe probably not. Maybe that was a different episode earlier on, but I remember I think it was this same Comic-Con I was telling you about that I was watching Amanda Tapping where she mentioned Dr. Fraiser, losing Dr. Fraiser, that how that episode really impacted her. But I also remember her saying that she used to feel like whenever she did scenes where she had to cry, she used to feel like she had to stay in the moment
Mhm.
and like she'd be off the screen at the side, waiting to go back on or whatever they're doing, and she'd still be crying, and it was, like, Richard Dean Anderson that told her, like, "You can't keep doing that. Like, you're gonna exhaust yourself," basically, I think is what it was, because she was just, like, crying continuously on purpose to try and stay in the moment, like I know it's a little bit off topic, but I wonder if it was for this episode or if it was maybe for one of the more beginning ones because she does cry in other things. So hopefully it wasn't this one because that seems like it would be so draining.
No kidding. Well, I'm curious. Like, I would be curious. I mean, obviously, I it's one of those things that I know in shows they film everything out of order. So, like, what was the experience doing that? Like, because for me, if I was, like, just reading a script or something, it would probably kill me.
Mhm.
Like, but who knows how you film the scenes? Maybe something was filmed and by that point, like, there was no emotional impact because everything was out of order. But,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
it must have been draining anyways. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Like I wonder too, do you know like was she solely from what I've tried to like quickly look up like before this pod like episode that we're recording, I was trying to look up, like, if it was, like, solely done that she was killed off for, the sake of the story, or if there's any other reason why she died, in the episode because maybe she had other things she was doing, but I think it was written in the case of the storyline, and they felt like
yep.
that was needed. Like, do you know, like, if there was any other reasons, like, if she was working on anything that they had to do that?
Not that as far as I know, like, I've only ever heard them say that, they thought at this point they needed to do something impactful like that, and so they picked a character that would have a huge impact, and it
Yeah.
did. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, and I wonder for the actress, like, how disappointing that must have been to, like,
yeah,
read. Like, I wonder if she was, told, like, way ahead of time so that she could prepare,
Mm-hmm.
because
Right.
I've
Yeah.
heard cases of different I would imagine with a show like this, hopefully they prepared her ahead of time,
No
and told
kidding.
her
Yeah.
ahead of time, because I have heard cases with other shows where they don't. Like, people
Oh,
just read the
really?
script and suddenly find out they're no longer in it, and then they get
Oh my
pissed off.
God. I
And
would
so,
die.
like yeah, and, like, I remember, when I first started doing the rewatch of Stargate SG-1, I remember I was, like, obsessively watching a bunch of, actor interviews, and I remember Michael Shanks saying that, the director, whatever, had played a prank on him. So when he had you froze for a second, so hopefully you can hear me. But what I was saying is the director played a prank on Michael Shanks in the very beginning season where like they were on a plane like going somewhere and he shows him this script and basically made Michael Shanks think that he was getting written out, like, he made him think that he was getting killed off, and, but then it ended up just being a prank that
Whoa.
he had played on him, like, he wasn't being written off because it was fairly early on, like,
Oh
it
no.
was, like, I think during the 1st season, like, um, I think it was the director or someone, with the show that like basically had given him like part of a script. And so Daniel thought that he like died and like was getting written off the show completely. So I was just like, if they can do
Whoa.
things
Yeah.
like that to characters where they're joking around with them that they're getting written off, like I would imagine maybe they have the respect to let someone know ahead of time that they're being written off
No
the show.
kidding. No kidding.
Um,
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
but yeah, it'd be interesting to know how she felt about all of that. And because sometimes I hear actors talk about like how like they're really sad to leave a show, but they
Yeah.
understand with the arc of their character, like it makes sense and they respect that. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. For sure. For sure. But yeah, I'd be curious to hear from other people how you felt about the Heroes two-parter
Yeah.
and whether it was as impactful for you as it was for us, how you feel it is as a two-parter, and were you also so affected by hearing of the passing of Dr. Fraiser? Was that a hard one? And did you know before you watched the episode, or were you like sort of taken by surprise?
Yeah, and overall, what were your feelings of Dr. Fraiser, like
Mm-hmm.
from start to end? I know in Spotify you can't leave long comments, so unfortunately, like there's only, I guess, a limited amount, but YouTube you can. So if you feel like doing so, feel free to leave your comments about what you felt about all the stuff that we discussed in this episode. So
Yes. Yeah, leave paragraphs.
yeah.
We love to read it. We actually love reading the comments. It's really nice to hear other perspectives and other opinions. So.
Yeah, definitely.